Welcome back to the channel. Since making this channel and really digging deeper into the way we can analyze chemical data, research data, I feel like I'm really living between two worlds, and I have this new perspective on research. One world that I spend most of my time in is from R1 academic institutions to large Fortune 500 companies where gaining access to primary research is easy. We have corporate contracts, or we have access to some of the most cutting edge research labs where we or myself can collect whatever sort of data we need on whatever type of instrumentation we have access to. And if we don't have it, we can either collaborate with the university or purchase that instrument and accomplish that need. However, since making this channel and trying to explain what we can do with data, how we can get more out of our analytical data, I now have this other perspective, this perspective of the outsider trying to look for data and really challenge myself to not use my Fortune 500 company privilege or my access through various universities because I want to maintain that separation in the same way that I ensure that the hardware I use, the software I use is all from my own personal investment. I don't want to use that access through those institutions. And now I have this perspective of how do you gain access to that data? And in doing so, having found a new appreciation for open access research, and the channel has greatly benefited from being able to gain access to data from journals from Elsevier, such as Data in Brief, where certain authors have elected to allow their data to be openly available, which is allowed for me to show you how we can further process that data, or even just looking through the full research articles for how those authors have elected to process the data or tell that story for the broader community. And so with this new perspective, it's been really interesting, and it's allowed me to think more about how we can make more data openly available. What would happen if we could do our own testing? And many of the journal articles that I have found to be the most interesting have relied on a technology such as like near infrared spectroscopy. And the benefit of this technology is that it doesn't require special solvents, it doesn't require high voltage, and with a relatively simple light source and a small compact design, this technology is really meant for everybody. From doing research, I know a lot of folks in the agricultural community are already using this to assess feedstock and the ripeness of fruits. But what would happen if we could sort of combine all of this data? This data has already shown benefit for analyzing drugs of abuse, as I've shown in some of the videos, but have also been shown to look at skin hydration or muscle compositional differences between men and women. And they're even able to map brain function by using functional near infrared spectroscopy and accomplishing many remarkable feats with that technology. And so with this perspective, I've been really entertaining this idea of instead of having these very discrete data sets, what would we learn, especially in this new age of AI, if we could combine all this data? And this is not a challenge to the authors to allow us to combine this data, but rather, what would happen if we all analyzed our data ourselves? What if we could all collect our own data, and from every packaging we see at the store to every fruit that we have ever consumed or a cup of coffee, all of this becomes one large repository of data, with the benefit being sort of the same benefit that has allowed many of the tools like ChatGPT and some of the facial recognition tools from like the Google Photos and Facebook, which have largely come from crowdsourced data, our information, now being used by some of the most cutting edge algorithms to help us out to make things more convenient. And of course, there's more to that. There's perhaps a darker side to that around privacy. But what if we were able to understand the chemical world around us? And doing this by connecting data sets, by connecting what we know about one field with what we don't know about another field. And if there's information we can borrow by unveiling some of these unknown similarities or differences. And so by having this new perspective, in the same way that I truly enjoy flying my drone. One of the benefits of drone flying is that you can see everyday stuff a little bit differently. I was out flying by the LA River, and there's this really cool orange bridge you cross as you go from one side of the river to the other, and then probably a 15-mile bike path that I have ridden multiple times at this point. And there's something just interesting about flying up above the bridge and over the river, and just this interesting perspective as you see people walk across, and then you see the graffiti and you see the river, and it's just a different perspective on the thing that you see every day. Or you zoom in really close on a macro shot and you see this flower that you've seen as a rose that might not be that remarkable, but looks really interesting when you zoom up close, and maybe you see a bee pollinating that flower, or you just see new details that are all necessary for that particular thing to exist. Now, to me, there's something similar about this ability to zoom in and zoom out and get this new vantage point that I see in analytical chemistry. In my training, I am a mass spectrometrist. I am trained to look at the molecular level of virtually anything. I may have mentioned that my thesis was about taking the mass spectrometer outside of the lab, taking the small shoebox sized mass spectrometer outside of the lab and into wherever the environment was we needed to do the testing, rather than bringing all the samples to the lab. Now, the downside of that technology wasn't necessarily the mass spectrometer itself, but what it took to run this system. You needed organic solvents, you needed high voltage. It was in the form that it's in now, and the current state of that technology is not as amenable to wide scale citizen testing. But there are technologies that would allow for you to get this new perspective, this new look into the chemical world. And I am betting on the underutilization of near infrared spectroscopy. This technology does have limitations in the density of information that can be stored, but with this new push in the data science space and pattern recognition, I think there's still way more that we can understand about this chemical world, not just by looking at drugs of abuse or just looking at feedstock, but what happens when you combine all of this and you look at every plant and you look at every package and you look at your skin health throughout the day, and you connect all of these data sets in such a way that might reveal interesting artifacts or help us to combat counterfeit drugs or surprise us in ways that we could not expect. I think in the same way, many of the conveniences around facial recognition and auto tagging our friends and all the things that we benefit from in our connected space now that we could not have imagined 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that's just part of our everyday existence. The ability to plug in your address, get map directions, and then detour before you ever see the accident that's 20 miles ahead of you, and you can get around it and never know why you had to go this alternate route. I think the same way that we can now begin to generate breakthroughs when we have the same technology dispersed. And so over the next probably 12 to 18 months, I'm really going to be exploring, as part of this larger set, what's possible in this chemical space. What types of tools and technologies can we as citizen scientists outside of the lab, without the expensive resources, what can we do to collect our own data? How can we bring the data together? How can we store that data? And continue to also explain how we can further activate and gain insights from this data. I have already shown ways to build models and evaluate those models and look for patterns within discrete data sets. But what happens when we can now begin combining these data sets to understand more about ourselves, and as it relates to the Tylenol we took this morning, or the cup of coffee we drank, or the flower we passed in the park, and understanding this other world, this new perspective around us, and maybe even having novel breakthroughs when it comes to now collecting and connecting all of this data together. Who knows? I don't know where this could lead, but I thought I would at least talk to you about this journey and let you know what I'm going to be exploring in my time. If you have any comments or any insights, any questions, let me know, and I'll keep you updated. In any case, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.